I spent my entire life savings, $23,000, to fly across the country and surprise my daughter for her wedding. I sold my grandmother's antique jewelry, emptied my retirement fund, and even took out a small loan, just to make this moment perfect for her. When I knocked on the door of her beautiful suburban home, my heart was racing with excitement. I couldn't wait to see the look on Sarah's face when she realized her mom had made it after all. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. But when that door opened, my daughter looked at me like I was a stranger selling something she didn't want. Her fiancé Marcus stood behind her, his arm possessively wrapped around her waist, and the words that came out of her mouth felt like ice water thrown in my face. "Mom, what are you doing here? We didn't invite you." The wedding invitation I'd received 3 months earlier suddenly felt like a cruel joke in my purse. They thought they knew everything about Olive Stone. They thought I was just some struggling single mother from a small town who couldn't afford to be part of their perfect new life. What they didn't know was that their rejection was about to unlock a truth that would turn their entire world upside down, and the woman they just dismissed would soon hold the keys to everything they thought they wanted. My name is Olive Stone, but everyone back home in Cedar Falls calls me Ollie. I'm 52 years old, and for the past 30 years, I've worked 3 jobs just to make ends meet. Waitressing at Murphy's Diner during the day, cleaning offices at night, and doing alterations for the local dry cleaner on weekends. My hands are rough from work, my back aches from standing on my feet for 12 hours straight, but I never complained because everything I did was for her. For Sarah. Sarah was my miracle baby, born when I was just 19 and absolutely terrified. Her father, a college boy named Tom, disappeared the moment I told him I was pregnant. Left me with nothing but a note saying he wasn't ready to be a father and a promise to send money that never came. I raised Sarah alone, in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment above the hardware store on Main Street. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Or so I thought. The wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember because it was my day off, and I was sitting at my kitchen table with my coffee, going through the bills, when I saw the elegant cream envelope with my name written in fancy calligraphy. My heart skipped a beat. After 2 years of barely any contact beyond obligatory holiday phone calls, Sarah was inviting me to her wedding. I tore it open with trembling fingers, and there it was. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell requests the honor of your presence at her marriage to Marcus Wellington Ashford III. The wedding was set for June 15th at the Ashford family estate in Beacon Hill, Massachusetts. The paper was thick and expensive, the kind I'd only seen in magazines. At the bottom, in smaller print, it mentioned black tie attire and overnight accommodations available upon request. I stared at that invitation for hours, reading it over and over again. My baby girl was getting married, and she wanted me there. The distance between Cedar Falls, Iowa, and Massachusetts might as well have been to the moon for someone like me, but I didn't care. I was going to make this happen. The next morning, I walked into First National Bank and met with Mr. Peterson, the loan officer who'd helped me finance my beat-up Honda Civic 5 years earlier. I told him I needed to borrow money for a family emergency, which wasn't exactly a lie. Missing my daughter's wedding would have been an emergency of the heart. "How much are you looking to borrow, Olive?" he asked. His reading glasses perched on the end of his nose as he pulled up my account information. $5,000, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He scrolled through his computer screen and I watched his expression grow concerned. "Olive, with your current income and debt-to-income ratio, I'm not sure we can approve that amount. Maybe we could look at $2,000? $2,000 wouldn't be enough. I'd already done the math. Round-trip airfare was $800. A decent hotel for 3 nights would be another $600. Then there was the dress I'd need to buy, something appropriate for a black tie wedding at an estate. Rental car, meals, maybe a wedding gift that wouldn't embarrass me in front of Sarah's new in-laws. I needed every penny of that $5,000. "Mr. Peterson," I said, leaning forward in my chair, "this is for my daughter's wedding. I haven't seen her in 2 years, and this might be my only chance to be part of the most important day of her life. Isn't there anything you can do?" He studied my file for a long moment, then looked up at me with kind eyes. "I'll tell you what, Olive. If you can come up with some collateral, something of value. We might be able to work something out. That's when I thought of my grandmother's jewelry. Nana Rose had left me her engagement ring, a beautiful vintage piece from the 1940s, with a small but perfect diamond, along with matching earrings and a delicate gold bracelet. She'd made me promise to keep them in the family, to pass them down to Sarah someday. But what good were family heirlooms if there wasn't a family to pass them to? I brought the jewelry to Peterson the next day, along with the appraisal I'd gotten from the antique shop downtown. The whole set was worth $3,500. Combined with what little I had in my savings account and the small loan against the jewelry, I managed to scrape together enough money to make the trip happen. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur of preparation and excitement. I found a beautiful navy blue dress at the outlet mall, something classic and elegant that wouldn't look out of place at a fancy wedding. I had my hair done for the first time in years, splurging on highlights and a proper cut that made me feel like a new woman. I even bought new shoes, uncomfortable but gorgeous heels, that made me 2 inches taller and infinitely more confident. I called Sarah 3 times to let her know I was coming, but each call went straight to voicemail. I left messages, telling her how excited I was, how proud I was of her, how much I was looking forward to meeting Marcus and his family. When she didn't call back, I told myself she was just busy with wedding preparations. Brides were always stressed before their big day. The flight from Des Moines to Boston was the first time I'd ever been on an airplane. I was terrified and exhilarated at the same time, watching the patchwork of farmland give way to cities and forests as we climbed higher than I'd ever imagined possible. I had my small suitcase packed with everything I thought I'd need for 3 days in Massachusetts, including a carefully wrapped wedding gift, a beautiful crystal vase I'd saved up to buy from the nice department store in Cedar Rapids. When we landed at Logan Airport, I felt like I was entering a different world. Everything was faster, louder, more intense than anything I'd experienced in Cedar Falls. The taxi ride to my hotel cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. But I didn't care. I was here. I'd made it. The hotel was modest but clean, in a part of Boston that the taxi driver assured me was safe and not too far from Beacon Hill. I checked in, hung up my wedding dress carefully in the small closet, and stood at the window looking out at the city skyline. Tomorrow was Sarah's rehearsal dinner, and the day after that was the wedding. I'd surprised her by coming, and I couldn't wait to see the joy on her face when she realized her mother had moved heaven and earth to be there for her special day. I should have called first. I should have waited for her to return one of my messages. But I was so caught up in the romance of the surprise, the idea of showing up like some fairy godmother to bless her wedding day, that I ignored the little voice in my head telling me something wasn't right. The next evening, I took another expensive taxi ride to the Ashford.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Family estate. The house was magnificent, a sprawling colonial mansion set on perfectly manicured grounds that looked like something out of a movie. Cars lined the circular driveway, expensive-looking vehicles that probably cost more than I'd made in the past 5 years combined. I smoothed down my dress, checked my lipstick and my compact mirror, and walked up to the front door with my heart hammering in my chest. The door was answered by a young man in a dark suit who looked at me with polite confusion. "Good evening, ma'am. Are you here for the Morrison rehearsal dinner?" "No," I said, smiling nervously. "I'm here for Sarah Mitchell's rehearsal dinner. I'm her mother, Olive Stone." His expression shifted slightly and he glanced back into the house before returning his attention to me. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't see your name on the guest list. Are you sure you have the right date?" Before I could answer, I heard Sarah's voice from somewhere inside the house, that familiar laugh that I'd missed so much over the past 2 years. "Excuse me," I said to the young man, "but that's my daughter. Sarah? Sarah, honey, it's Mom." The laughter stopped abruptly and I heard footsteps approaching. Then Sarah appeared in the doorway, looking absolutely stunning in a cream-colored cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, and she was wearing pearls that caught the light from the chandelier behind her. For a moment she just stared at me like she was seeing a ghost. "Mom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to surprise you," I said, my smile faltering slightly at her tone. "I got your invitation, and I knew I had to be here for your wedding. I flew all the way from Iowa to—" "You flew here?" she interrupted, glancing nervously back into the house. "Mom, I didn't expect you to actually come." Before I could process what she meant by that, a tall, handsome man appeared beside her. This had to be Marcus, the groom. He was everything I'd imagined from Sarah's brief descriptions during our rare phone conversations. Tall, well-dressed, with the kind of confident bearing that came from growing up with money. He looked at me with the same polite confusion as the young man who'd answered the door. "Darling, who's this?" he asked Sarah, his arm sliding around her waist in a gesture that seemed protective rather than welcoming. "Marcus, this is my mother," Sarah said, and I could hear something in her voice that I'd never heard before. Embarrassment. "Mom, this is Marcus." I stepped forward with my hand extended, ready to embrace my future son-in-law, but he simply shook my hand briefly and nodded. "Mrs. Stone, Sarah's mentioned you, of course." "She has?" I said, looking between them with growing unease. "Well, I hope you don't mind the surprise. I wanted to be here for your rehearsal dinner and the wedding tomorrow. I've been so looking forward to meeting you and your family." Marcus and Sarah exchanged a look that I couldn't quite read, and then Sarah took a small step from the doorway. "Mom, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The invitation. It was really more of a formality. We didn't actually expect you to come." The words hit me like a physical blow. "A formality?" I repeated, struggling to understand. "Sarah, it's your wedding. Of course I'd come. You're my daughter." "Mrs. Stone," Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm, "I'm afraid tonight is really just for immediate family and the wedding party. It's quite intimate, you understand." "But I am immediate family," I said, my voice starting to shake. "I'm her mother." Sarah looked down at her feet, and when she looked back up at me, her eyes were cold in a way I'd never seen before. "Mom, you should have called first. We didn't invite you because we didn't think you'd fit in here." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "Fit in?" "Look around," Sarah said, gesturing to the elegant foyer behind her, the crystal chandelier, the marble floors. "This isn't Cedar Falls, Mom. These people, Marcus's family, they're from a different world. A world where people don't work 3 jobs just to pay rent or clip coupons to buy groceries. I've worked so hard to build a new life here, and I can't have—" She trailed off, but I heard the word she didn't say. She couldn't have me embarrassing her in front of her new family. The mother who cleaned toilets for a living, who drove a 15-year-old car and bought her clothes at thrift stores. The mother who'd sacrificed everything to give her daughter opportunities I'd never had. "Sarah," I whispered, my heart breaking with every word. "I'm your mother. I raised you. I loved you. I spent my life savings to be here because I thought you wanted me here." "You spent your life savings?" Marcus asked, and I could hear something that might have been pity in his voice. $23,000. I said, the number falling from my lips like a confession. "I sold my grandmother's jewelry. I took out loans. I did whatever I had to do because this is your wedding day, and I couldn't bear the thought of missing it." Sarah's face went pale, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who used to tell me I was the best mommy in the world. But then Marcus's hand tightened on her waist, and her expression hardened again. "Mom, you shouldn't have done that. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're always so dramatic, always making everything about money and sacrifice. Can't you understand that some things are more important than that?" "More important than family?" I asked. "More important than embarrassment," she said quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the sound of laughter and conversation from deeper in the house, the clinking of glasses and the soft jazz music that created the perfect backdrop for a sophisticated rehearsal dinner. A dinner my daughter didn't want me at. "Sarah," I said one more time, my voice breaking, "please, I flew across the country for you. I spent everything I had because I love you." She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. But when she spoke, her voice was steady and final. "I'm sorry, Mom. But we didn't invite you. I think you should go back to your hotel." Marcus nodded in agreement. "Perhaps it would be best if you returned to Iowa tomorrow, before the wedding. This is a very delicate time for our families, and we can't afford any complications." Complications. That's what I was to my own daughter. A complication. I stood there on the steps of that magnificent house, in my carefully chosen dress and uncomfortable new shoes, holding a wedding gift for a daughter who didn't want me there. The woman who'd worked herself to the bone for 30 years to give her child every opportunity, who'd gone without so she could have, who'd loved her more than life itself. "I understand," I said finally, though I didn't understand anything at all. I turned to walk away, but Sarah called after me. "Mom, wait." For a moment, hope flared in my chest. Maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe love would win over embarrassment. "The invitation," she said. "I need you to understand something about the invitation." "What about it?" She looked at Marcus, who nodded slightly, giving her permission to continue. "We sent it because Marcus's mother insisted we invite all immediate family members for appearances. But we never expected you to actually come. We thought the cost would be prohibitive for someone in your situation. Someone in my situation. They'd counted on my poverty to keep me away from my own daughter's wedding." "Sarah," I said, my voice barely audible, "how could you think so little of me? How could you think I wouldn't move heaven and earth to be here for you?" "Because you never have before," she said, and her words cut deeper than anything else she'd said. "You never came to my college graduation. You missed my law school ceremony. You've never visited me here, never been part of my new life. So why would we expect you to start now?" The terrible thing was, she was right. I hadn't been to those events, but not because I didn't want to be there. I couldn't afford to be there. Every time Sarah had achieved something wonderful, something I was desperately proud of, the celebration was somewhere I couldn't reach. College graduation in California, law school ceremony in New York, now a wedding in Massachusetts. Each invitation had come with the unspoken understanding that I wouldn't actually attend. But this was different. This was her wedding day. This was supposed to be different. "You're right," I said quietly. "I couldn't afford to come to those things. But Sarah, this is your wedding," I thought. "I hoped." "You hoped wrong," Marcus said, not unkindly, but with finality. "Mrs. Stone, Sarah has built a new life here. A successful life. She's a lawyer with a prestigious firm, and I'm being considered for partner at my family's investment company. We can't afford to have anything threaten that stability. Anything. Or anyone." Like a mother who smelled like grease from the diner and had calluses on her hands from scrubbing floors. I nodded slowly, understanding, finally dawning. This wasn't about the wedding at all. This was about Sarah's decision to cut me out of her life permanently, to sever the last connection to the world she'd grown up in. The wedding invitation hadn't been a gesture of love or inclusion. It had been a test, and I'd failed by caring enough to show up. "I'll go," I said, turning away from the house, from my daughter, from the life she'd built without me. But as I walked down that long driveway, past all those expensive cars and perfectly trimmed hedges, I heard something that made me stop in my tracks. A voice from inside the house, a woman's voice with a distinctly upper-class accent. "Who was that, darling?" the voice asked. "Nobody important," I heard Sarah reply. "Just someone who got confused about the invitation." Nobody important. After 30 years of being the most important person in her life, I had become nobody. I kept walking, but something had changed inside me during that conversation. It wasn't just hurt anymore, though the pain was almost unbearable. It was something harder, more dangerous. It was the realization that my daughter had not only rejected me but had lied to these people about who I was. Had she told them I was dead? Had she simply never mentioned she had a mother? As I climbed into yet another expensive taxi to take me back to my modest hotel, I made a decision. I wasn't going home tomorrow. I'd spent $23,000 to be here. and I was going to find out exactly what kind of life my daughter had built on the foundation of my erasure. What Sarah didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Olive Stone hadn't survived 30 years of hardship by giving up when things got difficult. I'd been knocked down before, and I'd always gotten back up. This time would be no different. This time, I was going to discover what my daughter was so afraid of losing, and why she was willing to sacrifice her own mother to protect it. Because a woman doesn't become as cruel as Sarah had become without having something very valuable to hide, and I was going to find out what that something was. I woke up the next morning in my small hotel room, feeling like I'd been hit by a freight train. My eyes were swollen from crying, my head pounded from the stress, and my heart felt like it had been ripped out and stomped on. But underneath all that pain was something else. Something that had been growing stronger since I walked away from that mansion last night. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind that burns out quickly, but the cold, steady kind that feeds on itself and grows stronger with time. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes, and stared at my reflection in the mirror across the room. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. Not the confident mother who'd flown across the country to celebrate her daughter's wedding, but a broken woman who'd been discarded like yesterday's newspaper. But as I looked closer, I saw something else in those red-rimmed eyes. Determination. Sarah thought she could erase me from her life, pretend I didn't exist, and move on with her perfect new world. She thought wrong. I showered and put on fresh clothes, then sat down with the hotel's complimentary breakfast and a cup of coffee that tasted like it had been sitting on the burner for hours. My hands shook slightly as I pulled out my phone and did something I should have done weeks ago. I Googled my daughter. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell. The search results filled my screen, and with each link I clicked, my understanding of my daughter's new life became clearer and more disturbing. She wasn't just a lawyer with a prestigious firm. She was a rising star at Whitman Cross & Associates, one of Boston's most elite law firms. Her bio on the company website described her as a specialist in corporate mergers and acquisitions, with a particular focus on family wealth management. But it was her engagement announcement in the Boston Globe that really caught my attention. The article described her as the daughter of Elizabeth and Charles Mitchell, of Cedar Falls, Iowa, both deceased. According to this fictional biography, Sarah had overcome tremendous adversity after losing her parents in a car accident during her freshman year of college, working her way through law school with scholarships and determination. I read that paragraph 3 times, my coffee growing cold in my hands. Not only had Sarah erased me from her life, she'd created an entirely new family history. Parents who were dead and therefore couldn't embarrass her. Parents who sounded respectable and tragic rather than poor and inconvenient. The lies went deeper. The article mentioned that Sarah had inherited a modest trust fund from her late parents, which had helped her through law school. I knew exactly where that money had really come from. The life insurance policy I'd taken out on myself when Sarah was in high school, naming her as the beneficiary. I'd cashed it in during her senior year of college when she needed money for her LSAT prep courses and law school applications. Money I'd given her freely, thinking it was an investment in our shared future. She'd taken my sacrifice and turned it into a lie that painted me out of existence. I kept digging, following link after link, building a picture of the life my daughter had constructed. Marcus Wellington Ashford III wasn't just wealthy, he was generational money. His family owned one of the oldest investment firms in New England, with clients that included some of the most powerful families in the country. His mother, Victoria Ashford, was a fixture on Boston's charity circuit, the kind of woman who appeared in society magazines wearing gowns that cost more than most people's cars. And Sarah was about to marry into this world by pretending she came from it naturally. I found photos from charity galas and society events, pictures of Sarah looking radiant and confident beside Marcus. In every photo, she looked like she belonged, like she'd been born to wear designer gowns and discuss vintages of wine I'd never heard of. The transformation was remarkable and heartbreaking at the same time. But the more I learned about the Ashford family, the more I understood why Sarah was so desperate to maintain her facade. This wasn't just about money or social status. The Ashfords had built their fortune over generations by being very careful about who they associated with, who they trusted, who they allowed into their inner circle. Marcus's older brother had been quietly disinherited 5 years earlier for marrying a woman the family deemed unsuitable. His sister had been cut off from the family trust when she'd gotten involved with a man who had gambling debts. Sarah knew that if the Ashfords discovered the truth about her background, about me, it wouldn't just end her engagement. It would destroy the entire life she'd built for herself in Boston. I closed my laptop and sat back in the uncomfortable hotel chair, processing everything I'd learned. Part of me understood why Sarah had made the choices she'd made. Growing up poor leaves scars that never fully heal, and the opportunity to escape that life forever would be tempting to anyone. But the part of me that was still a mother, still the woman who'd sacrificed everything for her daughter's happiness, felt betrayed in a way that went beyond words. She hadn't just rejected me, she'd murdered me, at least on paper, and built her new life on my grave. My phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. For a moment my heart leaped, thinking it might be Sarah calling to apologize, to explain, to somehow make this right. But the caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Is this Olive Stone?" The voice was male, professionally pleasant. "Yes, who's asking?" "My name is Detective Ray Kowalski with the Boston Police Department. I understand you're in town visiting family?" My blood went cold. "Yes, that's right. Is something wrong?" "Well, ma'am, I'm calling because we've received a complaint about harassment and trespassing. Apparently you showed up uninvited at a private residence last night and caused some disturbance." I gripped the phone tighter, my mind racing. "Detective, I went to my daughter's rehearsal dinner. I was invited." "According to the complaint, ma'am, you weren't on the guest list and became belligerent when asked to leave. The family is requesting that you stay away from their property and from today's wedding ceremony." Belligerent. I'd stood on those steps with my heart breaking, speaking quietly and respectfully even as my world crumbled around me, and somehow I'd become the villain in this story. "Detective, there's been a misunderstanding. I received a wedding invitation. I flew here from Iowa specifically for my daughter's wedding." "Ma'am, do you have documentation of this invitation?" I did, of course. It was sitting in my suitcase, that elegant cream-colored card that had started this nightmare. But as I thought about it, I realized how this would look to a police officer. A working-class woman from Iowa, claiming she'd been invited to a high-society wedding, with no RSVP, no confirmation, no contact from the bride or groom's family. "I have the invitation," I said carefully. "Well, that's good, ma'am. But I need to advise you that if you approach the Ashford property today, or attempt to attend the wedding ceremony, you could be arrested for trespassing. The family has made it very clear that you're not welcome." The family, not Sarah, not my daughter. The family that had absorbed her so completely that she was willing to have her own mother arrested to protect her place in it. "I understand," I said quietly. "I hope you do, ma'am. I'd hate to see this escalate into something more serious. Maybe it would be best if you headed home today." After he hung up, I sat in that hotel room for a long time staring at the phone. They'd called the police on me. My own daughter had allowed her future in-laws to treat me like a criminal. The woman who'd worked 3 jobs to pay for her college education, who'd gone without so she could have everything she needed, was now considered a threat to her safety and security. But as the initial shock wore off, I found myself thinking more clearly than I had since I'd arrived in Boston. If Sarah wanted to play games, if she wanted to pretend I didn't exist and sick the police on me when I tried to be part of her life, then maybe it was time to stop playing by her rules. I opened my laptop again and started researching Boston private investigators. If my daughter had built her new life on lies, then maybe it was time someone started digging into what other secrets she might be hiding. Because in my experience, people who are willing to lie about something as fundamental as their family history are usually hiding much bigger secrets. The first PI I called was booked solid for the next 2 weeks. The second one wanted a retainer that was more than I had left in my checking account. But the third one, a woman named Rosa Martinez, who operated out of a small office in Dorchester, was intrigued enough by my story to agree to meet me that afternoon. Rosa was about my age, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner that reminded me of the women I worked with back home. We met at a coffee shop near her office, and I told her everything. About Sarah's fictional dead parents. About the trust fund that had really been my life insurance money. about the lies she'd built her engagement on. "So what exactly are you looking for?" Rosa asked, stirring sugar into her coffee. "I want to know what else she's lying about," I said. "People don't usually start with lies this big. If she's willing to fake her entire family history, what else is she hiding?" Rosa nodded thoughtfully. "I have to ask, Mrs. Stone, what's your endgame here? Are you looking to expose her? Get revenge? Reconcile with her?" I considered the question carefully. What did I want? 24 hours ago, the answer would have been simple. I wanted my daughter back. I wanted to be part of her life, to meet my future son-in-law, to maybe become a grandmother someday. But that woman who'd stood on the steps last night, who'd called the police on her own mother, wasn't the daughter I'd raised. That woman was a stranger. "I want the truth," I said finally. "I spent 30 years sacrificing for someone who doesn't exist anymore. I want to know who my daughter really became." Rosa quoted me her daily rate plus expenses. It would eat up most of what I had left from my savings, but I didn't care. I'd already spent everything on this trip. What was a little more? "One more thing," Rosa said as we shook hands. "Are you prepared for what we might find? Sometimes the truth is uglier than the lies." I thought about Sarah's cold eyes, her embarrassment, her willingness to have me arrested for the crime of loving her. I don't think it could be much uglier than what I already know. I was wrong about that, but I wouldn't find out how wrong until later. The wedding was scheduled for 4 o'clock that afternoon at the Ashford estate. I knew because I'd seen it mentioned in the society page of the Boston Globe, along with a note that the ceremony was private, limited to family and close friends. I wasn't planning to crash the wedding, despite what the police detective had implied. But I also wasn't planning to sit in my hotel room feeling sorry for myself while my daughter married into a fortune built on the erasure of my existence. Instead, I drove to Beacon Hill and parked across the street from the estate, far enough away that I couldn't be accused of trespassing, but close enough to see the comings and goings. I felt like a stalker, sitting in my rental car watching the house where my daughter was getting married, but I needed to see this. I needed to witness the final ceremony that would transform Sarah Mitchell into Sarah Ashford and complete her transition into a world where I had never existed. The guests began arriving around 3:30. Expensive cars driven by professionally dressed drivers, women in elegant dresses, and men in tailored suits. I recognized some faces from my internet research the night before. Boston's elite. People whose names appeared regularly in the society pages. Whose families had been wealthy for so long they'd forgotten what it felt like to worry about money. At 10 minutes to 4, I saw her. Sarah emerged from the house in a wedding dress that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. She was radiant, absolutely beautiful, with her hair swept up in an elaborate style and a veil that cascaded down her back like a waterfall of silk. For a moment, looking at her through my car window, I forgot about the lies and the betrayal and the police threats. All I could see was my little girl, grown up and glowing with happiness on the most important day of her life. She was accompanied by an older woman who could only be Victoria Ashford, Marcus's mother. Victoria was everything I'd expected from the society photos. Elegant and intimidating in a way that suggested she'd been born, knowing she was better than everyone else. She fussed over Sarah's dress, adjusting the train and making sure every detail was perfect. As they disappeared back into the house, I felt a stab of longing so sharp it took my breath away. That should have been me helping my daughter with her dress, making sure her veil was straight, sharing this moment with her. Instead, I was sitting in a car across the street like some kind of deranged ex-girlfriend, watching my daughter's life through a window I would never be invited to approach. My phone buzzed with a text message from Rosa. Initial research complete. Found some interesting things? Can we meet tonight? I texted back that I would call her after 6, then settled in to watch the rest of the wedding unfold from my distant vantage point. Guests filed into the house, photographers moved around the grounds capturing every angle, and musicians set up in what looked like a garden area behind the house. It was everything a fairy tale wedding should be, elegant and romantic and perfect. Everything I'd dreamed of for my daughter, happening without me. The ceremony itself was invisible from where I sat, but I could hear the music drifting across the street when the wind was right. Classical pieces I didn't recognize, played by what sounded like a full-string quartet. At one point I heard applause and cheering, and I knew it was over. Sarah was married. She was officially Mrs. Marcus Ashford, member of one of Boston's most prominent families, and I was officially nothing to her. But as I sat there in the gathering dusk, watching the lights come on in the mansion's windows, I realized something important. I might be nothing to Sarah, but she wasn't nothing to me. Not yet. And if Rosa had found something interesting in her initial research, then maybe this story wasn't over after all. The reception was clearly happening in the back garden, based on the sound of music and laughter that carried on the evening air. I could see the glow of elegant lighting through the trees, could imagine the scene I wasn't part of. Sarah dancing with her new husband, toasting with champagne that cost more than my monthly rent, surrounded by people who had no idea that her entire identity was built on a lie. Around 7 o'clock, I finally drove back to my hotel. I'd seen enough. I'd witnessed my daughter's transformation into someone I didn't recognize, and now it was time to figure out what to do with that knowledge. Rosa answered her phone on the first ring. "Mrs. Stone, I hope you're sitting down." "I'm sitting. What did you find?" "Well, for starters, your daughter isn't quite the legal prodigy she's pretending to be. She's had some issues at her law firm." "Nothing public, but I have a contact who works there. Apparently, she's been under investigation for the past 6 months for mishandling client funds." My stomach dropped. "What kind of mishandling?" "The kind where money goes into accounts it's not supposed to go into. Nothing's been proven yet, and they're keeping it quiet to avoid scandal, but she's on very thin ice professionally." "Is she stealing?" "That's what they're trying to figure out, but here's the interesting part. The investigation started right around the time she got engaged to Marcus Ashford. Makes you wonder if maybe she needed some quick cash to maintain her lifestyle while she was courting him." I absorbed this information slowly. My daughter, the brilliant lawyer I'd been so proud of, was potentially a thief. It explained a lot about why she was so desperate to marry Marcus, why she couldn't afford to have anything threaten her relationship with the Ashford family. "There's more," Rosa continued. "I did some digging into her apartment lease, her credit cards, her spending patterns. Mrs. Stone, your daughter is living way beyond her means. Her rent alone is more than her salary after taxes. She's got credit card debt in the 6 figures, and she's been juggling payments for months. How is that possible? She's a lawyer at a prestigious firm. She's a junior associate at a prestigious firm. The prestigious part doesn't mean much when you're starting out. She's making decent money, but not the kind of money needed to live like she's been living. Designer clothes, expensive restaurants, the kind of lifestyle that would impress a man like Marcus Ashford." The pieces were falling into place now. Sarah hadn't just erased me from her life to avoid embarrassment. She'd erased me because she needed to maintain an expensive facade to keep Marcus interested, and she was funding that facade with money that didn't belong to her. "Rosa, can you find out exactly how much money we're talking about? How deep in debt she is? How much she might have taken from her clients?" "I can try, but that kind of detailed financial information is harder to get. It'll take more time and cost more money." I thought about my dwindling bank account, about the credit cards I'd already maxed out for this trip. But I also thought about Sarah in that beautiful wedding dress, marrying a man whose family had no idea they were welcoming a potential criminal into their midst. "Do it," I said. "Whatever it costs." "Mrs. Stone, can I ask what you're planning to do with this information?" It was a fair question, and one I didn't have a complete answer to yet. But I knew one thing for certain. "I'm going to make sure the truth comes out," I said, "one way or another." After I hung up with Rosa, I sat in my hotel room staring out at the city lights and thinking about the woman my daughter had become. Not just the lies about her family, but the financial crimes, the deception, the willingness to build her entire future on a foundation of theft and fraud. This wasn't the little girl I'd raised, the one who used to cry when she accidentally stepped on a bug, who insisted on giving her allowance to homeless people we passed on the street. This was someone else entirely, someone driven by greed and desperation to a point where she was willing to destroy anyone who threatened her carefully constructed new life, including me. My phone rang again, interrupting my thoughts. This time it was a number I recognized, my bank back home in Cedar Falls. "Miss Stone, this is Jennifer from First National. I'm calling about some unusual activity on your account." My heart started racing. What kind of activity? Well, someone attempted to make a large withdrawal from your savings account this afternoon. The attempt was blocked because it required a secondary authorization, but I wanted to make sure you were aware of it. How large a withdrawal? $15,000. The person had your account number and social security number, but they weren't able to provide the security question answer. I felt sick. Jennifer, I'm in Boston. I haven't tried to access my account today. I was afraid of that. Ms. Stone, someone is trying to steal your money. Do you have any idea who might have access to your personal information? I did have an idea, and it made me feel like the world was spinning off its axis. There was only one person who knew my social security number, who might have had access to my account information during one of her visits home over the years. Jennifer, I need you to freeze that account immediately. Don't let anyone access it, including me, until I get back to Iowa and can sort this out in person. Of course. And Ms. Stone, you should probably check your credit report. If someone has your social security number, they might be trying to open accounts in your name. After I hung up, I sat there trying to process what had just happened. Sarah hadn't just stolen from her law firm clients. She'd tried to steal from me. On her wedding day, while she was dancing with her new husband and celebrating her bright future, she'd attempted to clean out what was left of my savings account. The account that contained the last few $1,000s I had to my name, money I needed to get home and survive until my next paycheck. I logged into my credit monitoring service and felt my blood pressure spike as I scrolled through the alerts. 3 new credit card applications in my name, all submitted within the past week. A car loan inquiry. An application for a personal line of credit. All of them using my information but listing a Boston address I didn't recognize. Sarah had been systematically destroying my financial life while I was traveling across the country to celebrate her wedding. I called Rosa back immediately. I need you to add something to your investigation, I said without preamble. I think my daughter has been stealing my identity as well as her clients' money. Rosa was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Stone, are you sure about this? Accusing your own daughter of identity theft is a serious allegation. Someone just tried to withdraw $15,000 from my savings account while I was sitting in a hotel room in Boston. Someone who had my social security number and account information. There are credit card applications in my name with a Boston address. Who else could it be? Okay, Rosa said slowly. This changes things significantly. Identity theft is a federal crime. If we can prove your daughter is doing this, she's looking at serious prison time. Can you prove it? Possibly. It'll take some time to trace the digital footprints, to connect the applications to her. But if she's been sloppy about covering her tracks, then yes, we might be able to build a case. After we hung up, I spent the rest of the evening canceling credit cards, putting fraud alerts on my accounts, and generally trying to contain the damage Sarah had done to my financial life. It was past midnight when I finally finished, and I was exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. I was soul-deep tired. Tired of being betrayed by the person I loved most in the world. Tired of discovering that my daughter wasn't just embarrassed by me, but was actively trying to destroy me. Tired of realizing that the sacrifices I'd made, the love I'd given, the life I'd devoted to raising her, had all been repaid with this systematic campaign of theft and deception. But underneath the exhaustion was something else, something harder and more determined than anything I'd felt in years. Sarah thought she could erase me, steal from me, and move on with her perfect new life without consequences. She thought she could treat me like garbage, and I'd just disappear quietly, too poor and powerless to fight back. She was about to learn that she'd seriously underestimated her mother, because tomorrow, I was going to start fighting back. And when I was done, her beautiful new life was going to come crashing down around her ears. The wedding was over. The honeymoon phase of her marriage was about to begin. But Sarah's real education was just getting started, and I was going to be her teacher. I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The heartbroken mother who'd been crying in this hotel room yesterday was gone, replaced by someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. Sarah had made a critical mistake when she'd tried to steal my identity along with everything else. She'd crossed a line that transformed this from a family drama into something much more serious. Rosa called at 8 a.m. sharp. I've got some preliminary results on the identity theft investigation. You're going to want to hear this, I'm listening. The credit card applications were all submitted from the same IP address, and that address traces back to your daughter's apartment building. More specifically, to the business center in her building, where residents can use computers and printers. Can you prove she was the one using the computer? That's where it gets interesting. The building has security cameras in the business center, and I have a contact who can access the footage. But Mrs. Stone, if we go down this road, there's no going back. Once we have video evidence of your daughter committing federal crimes, we're talking about involving the FBI. I thought about Sarah in her wedding dress, radiant and beautiful, dancing with her new husband while simultaneously trying to destroy my financial life. Get the footage. There's something else. I reached out to my contact at her law firm, and the internal investigation is moving faster than they initially thought. Apparently, they've traced at least $60,000 in missing client funds, and they're planning to bring in federal investigators within the next 2 weeks. $60,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about maintaining a lifestyle anymore. This was serious criminal activity, the kind that resulted in prison sentences and destroyed lives permanently. Rosa, I need you to find out everything you can about the Ashford family's background checks. People like that don't just let anyone marry into their family without investigating them thoroughly. You think they might already know something? I think people with that much money don't stay wealthy by being careless about who they trust. If Sarah's been under investigation at her law firm for 6 months, and if she's been living beyond her means, then either the Ashfords are incredibly naive, or they know something we don't. I'll look into it. But Mrs. Stone, what's your endgame here? Are you planning to expose her to her new husband? To the law firm? To the FBI? It was a question I'd been wrestling with all night. What did I want? Justice? Revenge? Some twisted form of reconciliation? The truth was, I wasn't entirely sure yet, but I knew I couldn't let her continue destroying lives, including mine, without consequences. I want to give her a chance to make this right, I said finally. One chance to tell the truth and fix what she's broken. If she won't take it, then I'll make sure the truth comes out whether she likes it or not. And if exposing her destroys her marriage? I thought about Marcus, the handsome young man who'd seemed genuinely bewildered by my appearance at his rehearsal dinner. He wasn't evil, just privileged and naive. He deserved to know who he'd married, even if the knowledge would devastate him. Then maybe he deserves to know what kind of person he's married to before it's too late. Rosa agreed to continue her investigation, and we arranged to meet again that evening. After we hung up, I sat in my hotel room planning my next move. I needed to see Sarah face to face, needed to give her that one chance to come clean before I burned her entire world to the ground. But first I needed to understand exactly how deep her deception ran. I spent the morning researching the Ashford family more thoroughly, digging into their business dealings, their social connections, their history of marriages and divorces. What I found was fascinating and disturbing in equal measure. The Ashford family wealth came from 3 generations of careful investment and strategic marriages. Marcus's grandfather had built the fortune, his father had expanded it, and Marcus was being groomed to continue the legacy. But the family had a strict policy about protecting their assets. Every marriage came with an ironclad prenuptial agreement, every new family member was thoroughly investigated, and anyone who threatened the family's reputation or financial stability was cut off completely and permanently. Marcus's brother hadn't just been disinherited for marrying the wrong woman. He'd been systematically excluded from every family business, every social circle, every connection that might have helped him rebuild his life independently. The Ashfords didn't just punish disloyalty, they obliterated it. If they discovered what Sarah had been hiding, they wouldn't just divorce her. They would destroy her so completely that she'd never recover. The thought should have given me satisfaction, but instead it made me feel slightly sick. Whatever Sarah had become, whatever crimes she'd committed, she was still my daughter. The idea of watching her be systematically destroyed by a family with unlimited resources and no conscience was harder to stomach than I'd expected. But then I remembered the credit card applications in my name, the attempt to steal my savings, the casual way she'd told her new in-laws that I was nobody important. The sick feeling faded, replaced by cold determination. Around noon, I drove to Sarah's apartment building in Back Bay. It was exactly the kind of place I'd expected, all glass and steel and expensive finishes, with a doorman who looked like he'd been hired as much for his intimidating presence as his customer service skills. I sat in my rental car across the street, watching the building and trying to decide how to approach this. I couldn't just walk up to the doorman and ask to see Sarah Ashford. After yesterday's police call, she'd probably left instructions to have me arrested if I showed up. But I needed to see her, needed to look her in the eye and give her the chance to explain herself before I destroyed her life as thoroughly as she'd tried to destroy mine. The answer came in the form of a young woman in scrubs walking out of the building around 1 o'clock. She looked tired and harried, like someone finishing a night shift at a hospital. I followed her to a coffee shop 3 blocks away and approached her carefully. "Excuse me," I said as she waited in line. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but do you live in the building on Newbury Street, the tall glass one with the doorman?" She looked at me suspiciously. "Why?" "I'm trying to reach my daughter who lives there, but she's not answering her phone and I'm worried about her. I flew in from out of town and I just want to make sure she's okay." The woman's expression softened slightly. "What's your daughter's name?" "Sarah." "Sarah Ashford. She just got married yesterday." "Oh." The woman's face lit up. "You're Sarah's mom. She mentioned you might be visiting. I'm Jenny. I live 2 floors down from her." My heart started racing. Sarah had told her neighbors about me? That didn't fit with the story she'd given Marcus's family. "She mentioned me?" I asked carefully. "Yeah, she said her mom was coming for the wedding, but that there had been some kind of miscommunication about the timing. She felt really bad about it." I stared at Jenny, trying to process this information. Sarah had told her neighbors a completely different story than she'd told the Ashfords. To Marcus's family, I didn't exist. To her neighbors, I was the beloved mother she'd accidentally disappointed. "Did she say anything else about me?" Jenny glanced around the coffee shop, then leaned closer. "She said you'd had a falling out a few years ago, but that she was hoping to reconcile. She seemed really emotional about it, actually. I got the impression she was planning to surprise you with something." "Surprise me with something?" I thought about the attempted theft of my savings account, the credit card applications, the systematic destruction of my financial life. What kind of surprise had she been planning? "Jenny, can I ask you something? Has Sarah seemed stressed lately? Worried about money or work?" Jenny's expression grew concerned. "Now that you mention it, she has seemed really anxious for the past few months. I heard her on the phone a couple of times and it sounded like she was having problems at work." "Something about an investigation? Did she mention any details?" "Not really, but she seemed scared. Like, really scared. The kind of scared that keeps you up at night pacing around your apartment." We ordered our coffee and sat down at a small table by the window. Jenny was clearly worried about Sarah, and I found myself feeling an unexpected kinship with this stranger, who'd shown more concern for my daughter than Sarah had shown for me. "Jenny, I need to ask you for a favor, and I know it's going to sound strange." "Okay, I need to get into the building to see Sarah, but I think she might not want to see me right now. Is there any way you could help me get past the doorman?" Jenny studied my face for a long moment. "You seem like a nice lady, and Sarah's always been a good neighbor. But why would she not want to see her own mother?" It was a fair question, and one I couldn't answer honestly without revealing things that weren't mine to share. We had a disagreement about the wedding. Family stuff, you know? But I'm worried about her, and I think she might be in trouble. "What kind of trouble?" I looked into Jenny's kind eyes and made a decision. The kind of trouble that could destroy her marriage and her career if someone doesn't help her fix it soon. Jenny was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay. But I want to be there when you talk to her. Sarah's been good to me, and if she's really in trouble, then she needs friends around her." We walked back to the building together, and Jenny led me through a side entrance that bypassed the main lobby. Her keycard got us into the elevator, and we rode up to the 15th floor in tense silence. When we reached Sarah's door, Jenny knocked gently. "Sarah? It's Jenny. I brought someone who wants to see you." There was movement inside the apartment, then Sarah's voice muffled by the door. "Jenny, I'm not really up for visitors today." "Sarah, it's your mom." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the hum of the building's ventilation system. Then footsteps, slow and hesitant, approaching the door. When it opened, Sarah looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was unwashed, her face was pale, and she was wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt that looked like she'd been sleeping in them. This wasn't the radiant bride from yesterday's wedding. This was someone who looked like she was falling apart. "Mom?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Hello, Sarah?" Jenny looked between us, clearly sensing the tension. "I'll just go check my mail," she said diplomatically, heading back toward the elevator. Sarah and I stood there, staring at each other across the threshold of her apartment. She looked fragile and young, like the little girl who used to have nightmares and crawl into my bed for comfort. But I couldn't let myself be swayed by appearances. Not after everything she'd done. "Can I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was beautiful, all modern furniture and expensive finishes, but it looked like a tornado had hit it. There were clothes everywhere, empty takeout containers on the coffee table, and papers scattered across every surface. The papers, I noticed, looked like legal documents. "Congratulations on your wedding," I said, settling onto the couch and moving a stack of papers to make room. Sarah flinched. "Mom, I can explain about yesterday." "Can you?" "Because I'd love to hear your explanation for having me threatened with arrest on your wedding day." She sat down across from me, her hands shaking slightly. "I didn't want them to call the police. That was Marcus's mother's idea. She doesn't understand our situation." "Our situation? Sarah, what exactly is our situation?" "Because according to the wedding announcement in the Boston Globe, I've been dead for several years." Sarah's face crumpled. "You saw that?" "I saw a lot of things. I saw that you've been telling people your parents died in a car accident. I saw that you've created an entire fictional family history. I saw that you've been living a life that costs more than you make and funding it in ways that are going to land you in federal prison." "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the fraud alerts from my bank. Someone tried to steal $15,000 from my savings account yesterday. Someone who had my social security number and account information. Someone who also applied for 3 credit cards in my name using a Boston address. Sarah went completely white. "Mom, I can explain." "You can explain why you tried to steal from me on your wedding day? This should be good." She started crying then, deep sobs that shook her entire body. "I didn't have a choice. I'm in so much trouble, Mom, so much trouble that I don't know how to get out of it." "What kind of trouble?" "The law firm. They're investigating me for embezzlement. They think I stole money from client accounts, and they're right. I did steal it. I've been stealing it for months." Finally, the truth. Or at least part of it. "How much?" $63,000. "Why?" Sarah wiped her nose with the back of her hand, a gesture so reminiscent of her childhood that my heart ached despite everything. "Because I needed to be someone I'm not. Because Marcus's world costs money I don't have. Because I thought if I could just get married, if I could just become part of his family, then I could figure out how to pay it back. And stealing from me was part of that plan?" She nodded miserably. "I thought you'd never notice. You hardly ever check your bank account online, and I was going to pay it back as soon as I figured out how to get the money from Marcus's family." "You were planning to steal from your new husband?" "Not steal, borrow. The Ashfords have so much money, Mom, more money than they could spend in 10 lifetimes. I thought maybe I could get access to some of it, just enough to fix everything, and then no one would ever have to know." I stared at my daughter, this woman I'd raised, who was sitting in her expensive apartment, explaining how she'd planned to systematically rob everyone who trusted her. "Sarah, do you have any idea what you've done? Do you understand that identity theft is a federal crime? That embezzlement is a felony?" "I know," she whispered, "but I was desperate. You don't understand what it's like to live in this world, to try to fit in with people who have everything handed to them. I had to pretend to be someone I'm not every single day. So you pretended I was dead. It was easier than explaining that my mother cleans toilets for a living. The words hung in the air between us like a slap. There it was, the truth she'd been dancing around for 2 years. She was ashamed of me, ashamed of where she came from, ashamed of the sacrifices I'd made for her, ashamed of the life I'd lived so she could have better. "Sarah," I said slowly, "I need you to understand something. You're not just in trouble. You're in catastrophic, life-destroying trouble. When the FBI gets involved in your case at work, and they will, they're going to discover the identity theft. They're going to trace it back to you. And when they do, you're looking at serious prison time. How do you know all this? Because I hired a private investigator. Because I wanted to understand what had happened to my daughter, why she'd turned into someone who could look me in the eye and call the police on me." Sarah's face went even paler. "You hired a PI? Mom, you don't understand. If the Ashfords find out about any of this, they'll destroy me. Not just divorce me, destroy me. They'll make sure I never work in this city again, never have any kind of decent life. Maybe you should have thought of that before you decided to build your entire relationship on lies." "I love him," she said desperately. "I really do love Marcus. And he loves me. If I can just figure out how to fix this, how to pay back the money and make everything right, then we can have a real marriage." "Sarah, listen to me very carefully. There is no fixing this. The FBI doesn't care about your love story. Your law firm doesn't care about your marriage. You committed serious crimes, and there are going to be serious consequences." She stood up abruptly and started pacing around the living room. "There has to be a way. There has to be something I can do. There is something you can do." She stopped pacing and looked at me hopefully. "You can tell Marcus the truth. You can tell him about your background, about the embezzlement, about everything. You can ask him to help you get a good lawyer and try to minimize the damage. I can't do that." "Why not?" "Because he'll leave me. The moment he finds out who I really am, where I really come from, he'll leave me, and his family will make sure I'm destroyed completely." I looked around her expensive apartment, at the designer clothes scattered everywhere, at the evidence of a life built on lies and theft. "Sarah, you're going to be destroyed anyway. The only question is whether you're going to face it with some dignity or wait for it to all come crashing down around you." She sat back down, her head in her hands. "I can't tell him, I just can't." "Then I will." Her head snapped up. "What?" "I said I'll tell him everything. About who you really are, about the crimes you've committed, about the fact that you're about to be arrested for federal offenses." "You wouldn't." I looked at my daughter, this stranger who'd stolen from me and lied about me and tried to erase me from existence, and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. "Watch me." I stood up to leave, but Sarah grabbed my arm. "Mom, please, I'm begging you. Give me 24 hours. Give me 1 day to figure out how to tell him myself." "Why should I?" "Because I'm your daughter. Because despite everything I've done, I know you still love me. And because if you destroy my marriage, you'll never have a relationship with me again." It was a threat disguised as a plea, and we both knew it. Sarah was gambling that my love for her was stronger than my anger, that I wouldn't be able to follow through on my promise to expose her. She was probably right, but that didn't mean I was going to make it easy for her. 24 hours, I said. "But Sarah, if you don't tell him everything, if you try to run or hide or come up with some new scheme, I will not only tell Marcus the truth, I will hand over everything I've learned to the FBI myself." She nodded frantically. Okay, I'll do it. I'll tell him tonight." "All of it?" "All of it." I walked toward the door, then turned back. "Sarah, for what it's worth, I hope you do tell him. I hope he's the kind of man who can handle the truth and still love you. Because if he is, then maybe you can salvage something from this mess. And if he's not?" I thought about Marcus, with his perfect clothes and his privileged upbringing, and his family's fortune built on careful reputation management. Then you'll learn something important about the difference between love and convenience. I left her sitting in her destroyed apartment, surrounded by the evidence of her crimes and her lies. As I rode the elevator down to the lobby, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. After days of confusion and heartbreak and rage, I finally understood exactly what was happening and what needed to be done. Sarah had until tomorrow night to tell Marcus the truth. If she did, and if he chose to stand by her despite everything, then I would step back and let them figure out their future together. I would even help her find a good lawyer, would do whatever I could to minimize the consequences of her actions. But if she didn't tell him, if she tried to continue living this lie even one more day, then I would make sure the truth came out in the most devastating way possible. Either way, this nightmare was almost over. One way or another, by tomorrow night, my daughter would finally be forced to face the consequences of her choices. The only question was whether she'd face them alone or with the support of a husband who truly loved her. Somehow, given what I'd learned about the Ashford family and their attitude towards scandal, I wasn't optimistic about her chances. But that was no longer my problem. I'd given her the choice, and whatever she decided would be on her. For the first time since I'd arrived in Boston, I felt like I could finally go home. Whether Sarah chose honesty or continued deception, my role in this story was almost finished. Almost. 24 hours felt like an eternity and an instant all at once. I spent the evening in my hotel room, staring at my phone, waiting for Sarah to call and tell me she'd confessed everything to Marcus. The call never came. By morning, I knew she wasn't going to follow through. My daughter, the woman I'd raised to believe in honesty and integrity, had chosen to continue living her lie right up until the very end. The knowledge didn't surprise me anymore, but it still cut deep. Rosa called at 9 a.m. with an update that sealed Sarah's fate. "The security footage from her building's business center is conclusive," she said without preamble. "We have clear video of your daughter using the computers to submit the credit applications in your name. The timestamps match exactly with when the applications were filed." "What about the law firm investigation?" "That's moving faster than anyone expected. My contact says they're bringing in federal agents this afternoon. Your daughter doesn't know it yet, but she's going to be arrested within the next 48 hours. I absorbed this information while staring out my hotel window at the city where my daughter had built and was about to lose everything. "Rosa, I need you to do one more thing for me." "What's that?" "I need you to compile everything we've found into a comprehensive report. Every document, every piece of evidence, every detail about the embezzlement and the identity theft. I want it professionally formatted and ready to present to someone who matters." "Who are you planning to give it to?" "Marcus Ashford." There was a pause. "Mrs. Stone, are you sure about this?" "Once you hand over that information, there's no taking it back. You'll be directly responsible for destroying your daughter's marriage." I thought about Sarah sitting in her apartment yesterday, surrounded by evidence of her crimes, looking me in the eye and promising to tell Marcus the truth. I thought about the phone call that never came, the 24 hours of silence that told me everything I needed to know about who my daughter had become. "She's already destroyed her marriage," I said. "She just doesn't know it yet." By noon, I had Rosa's report in my hands. It was thorough, damning, and impossible to dismiss. Bank records showing the attempted theft from my accounts. Security footage proving Sarah's involvement in identity theft. Financial documents revealing her massive debt and desperate spending. Communications from her law firm confirming the embezzlement investigation. It was everything Marcus needed to know about the woman he'd married, presented in stark black and white. I called the Ashford family estate and asked to speak with Marcus privately. The woman who answered the phone, probably a secretary or assistant, was polite but firm about not disturbing the family during their post-wedding celebration. I told her it was regarding urgent legal matters concerning his wife, and that seemed to get her attention. "Mr. Ashford will call you back within the hour," she said. When my phone rang 50 minutes later, Marcus sounded confused and slightly annoyed. "Mrs. Stone? I thought we'd made it clear that you weren't welcome at our wedding celebration." "Mr. Ashford, I'm not calling about the wedding. I'm calling because there are things you need to know about your wife. Things that could affect your family's reputation and financial security." The line went quiet for a moment. "What kind of things?" "The kind that need to be discussed in person. I have documentation that you're going to want to see." "Mrs. Stone, if this is some kind of attempt to insert yourself into our marriage—" "Mr. Ashford," I interrupted, "your wife is about to be arrested by federal agents for embezzlement and identity theft." If you'd prefer to find that out when the FBI shows up at your door, that's your choice. But I thought you might want to know in advance. Another pause, longer this time. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was different, sharper, more focused. Where do you want to meet? We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in downtown Boston, neutral territory, where we could talk without the influence of his family or the pressure of their estate. I arrived early and claimed a corner table where we could speak privately. When Marcus walked in, he looked like a man who'd aged years in the 3 days since his wedding. He was still handsome, still well-dressed, but there was a tension in his shoulders and a wariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He spotted me immediately and walked over with the careful measured steps of someone who wasn't sure what kind of explosion he was walking into. Mrs. Stone. He sat down across from me without offering to shake hands. Thank you for coming. I'm here because you mentioned federal agents. I need to know if that was hyperbole, or if my family is about to be dealing with a very serious situation. I slid the report across the table. It's not hyperbole. Marcus opened the folder and began reading. I watched his face as he processed the information, saw the exact moment when the full scope of Sarah's deception hit him. His jaw tightened, his hands gripped the papers harder, and a muscle in his cheek started twitching. This says she stole over $60,000 from her law firm. That's correct. And that she tried to steal from your bank accounts. On your wedding day, yes. He flipped through more pages, studying the security footage stills, the financial records, the evidence of months of systematic fraud. These identity theft charges, if they're proven, she could go to prison. She could go to prison for the embezzlement alone. The identity theft just makes it worse. Marcus closed the folder and sat back in his chair, staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Why are you showing me this? It was a fair question and one I'd been asking myself since I'd decided to compile the evidence. Because you deserve to know who you married. Because your family deserves to know what kind of scandal is about to hit them. And because my daughter had a chance to tell you all of this herself, and she chose not to. You gave her a chance? 24 hours. I went to her apartment yesterday and told her everything I'd discovered. I begged her to tell you the truth herself, to give your marriage a chance to survive this. She promised she would. She didn't. She didn't. Marcus was quiet for a long time, processing not just the information in the report, but the implications of Sarah's continued deception. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Mrs. Stone, can I ask you something? Of course. What do you want from me? What do you expect me to do with this information? I'd been dreading this question because I wasn't entirely sure of the answer myself. What did I want? Justice? Revenge? Some form of reconciliation that was probably impossible now? I want you to make an informed decision about your future, I said finally. I want you to know the truth before the FBI shows up and your family finds out from news reports. Beyond that, what you do is up to you. You're not asking me to leave her? I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm giving you information and letting you decide what to do with it. Marcus nodded slowly, then opened the folder again and studied one of the financial documents more carefully. This debt level, this spending pattern, it explains a lot about her behavior over the past few months. She's been anxious, secretive, always checking her phone. She's been covering up a crime spree, apparently. He closed the folder again. Mrs. Stone, there's something I need to tell you. Something you probably don't know. What's that? My family already knows most of this. I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. What do you mean? We don't marry people without investigating them thoroughly. My family has known about Sarah's financial problems, her employment issues, even her family background for months. Her family background? We know you exist. We know you're alive and well and living in Iowa. We know about your jobs, your financial situation, everything. I stared at him, trying to process this revelation. Then why did you let her lie about it? Why did you go along with the story about her parents being dead? Marcus looked uncomfortable for the first time since sitting down. Because my mother thought it was easier, less complicated. Sarah was obviously ashamed of her background, and my family felt it was kinder to let her maintain the fiction than to force her to acknowledge realities that embarrassed her. Kinder to who? To everyone involved, including you. The condescension in his voice made my blood boil. Mr. Ashford, are you telling me that your family knew I existed but decided it was better for everyone if I stayed erased from my daughter's life? Mrs. Stone, please understand, we weren't trying to hurt you. We just felt that forcing Sarah to acknowledge her circumstances would be painful for everyone. Her circumstances? You mean me? Marcus had the grace to look ashamed. We felt that the differences between your world and ours were so significant that it would be difficult for everyone to navigate. I felt something snap inside me. This wasn't just about Sarah's crimes anymore. This was about an entire family that had decided I was too poor, too common, too embarrassing to acknowledge, and had encouraged my daughter to maintain the fiction that I didn't exist. Mr. Ashford, let me make sure I understand this correctly. Your family knew Sarah was lying about me being dead, and you all agreed that was preferable to having to actually meet me? It wasn't personal. It was completely personal. You looked at my daughter's background, looked at where she came from, looked at me, and decided we weren't good enough to be part of your perfect family. That's not how we saw it. How did you see it? Marcus was quiet for a moment, clearly struggling with how to explain his family's position without making it sound as callous as it obviously was. We saw it as protecting everyone from an awkward situation. Awkward for who? For you? For your family? Because it wasn't awkward for me, it was devastating. Mrs. Stone, I understand you're upset. Do you? Do you understand what it felt like to fly across the country for my daughter's wedding only to be told I wasn't invited? Do you understand what it felt like to discover that not only was I not welcome, but that my own daughter had been telling people I was dead? Marcus didn't answer, which was answer enough. Here's what I think happened, I continued. Your family investigated Sarah and discovered she was exactly the kind of person they usually avoid. Poor background, financial problems, legal troubles. But for some reason, you wanted to marry her anyway. So instead of dealing with the reality of who she was, you all decided to help her create a more acceptable fiction. It wasn't like that, wasn't it? You knew about the embezzlement investigation at her law firm? Marcus hesitated. We knew she was having some professional difficulties. Professional difficulties? Is that what you call stealing $60,000 from client accounts? We didn't know the full extent. But you knew enough to know she was in trouble. And instead of encouraging her to face her problems honestly, you gave her a way to hide from them. You gave her permission to erase her past and pretend to be someone she's not. Marcus was looking increasingly uncomfortable, and I realized I was getting closer to the truth than he wanted to admit. Mr. Ashford, why did you really marry my daughter? Because it wasn't for her honesty or her integrity, was it? He was quiet for a long time, staring down at his hands. When he finally looked up, there was something different in his expression, something that looked almost like relief. You want the truth? I'd appreciate it. I married her because my family needed a scandal. I blinked, certain I'd misheard him. I'm sorry, what? My family needed a scandal. A controlled, manageable scandal that would distract from some other problems we've been having. Problems that could destroy us if they became public. What kind of problems? Marcus glanced around the coffee shop, making sure no one was listening, then leaned forward. The kind of problems that involve federal investigations into our business practices. The kind that involve tax evasion and money laundering and connections to some very unsavory people. I felt like I was falling down a rabbit hole. Are you telling me your family is under federal investigation? Has been for 2 years. We've managed to keep it quiet so far, but we know it's only a matter of time before charges are filed. When that happens, we needed something to humanize us, to make us look sympathetic instead of like the entitled criminals we probably are. And Sarah, was that something? Sarah was perfect. Beautiful, accomplished, with a tragic backstory that would make people feel sorry for us instead of angry at us. The poor girl who lost her parents but overcame adversity to marry into our family. When our legal troubles become public, which they will, she was going to be our redemption story. I stared at him, trying to process the magnitude of what he was telling me. You married my daughter to use her as a public relations shield. Essentially, yes. And she doesn't know this. She has no idea. She thinks I married her because I love her, and maybe I do. In my way. But that's not why my family approved the marriage. Mr. Ashford, are you aware that what you've just told me makes your entire family as manipulative and dishonest as my daughter? He smiled. And it wasn't a pleasant expression. Mrs. Stone, we're much worse than your daughter. She stole money because she was desperate and scared. We've been stealing money for decades because we could get away with it. Then why are you telling me this? Because you asked for the truth, and because I'm tired of living in a family of lies. Because maybe it's time for all of this to come out in the open. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed by the revelations of the past few minutes. My daughter hadn't just married into wealth. She'd married into a criminal organization that was planning to use her as a shield when their own crimes were exposed. She was a pawn in a game she didn't even know she was playing. Mr. Ashford, what happens now? When the FBI arrests Sarah for her crimes, how does that affect your family's plans? It doesn't. If anything, it makes her more sympathetic. The poor girl who made mistakes because she was trying to fit into our world. We'll stand by her, get her the best lawyers, probably arrange for her to serve minimal time in a minimum security facility. When she gets out, she'll be the perfect repentant wife who learned from her mistakes. And if she doesn't want to play that role, she doesn't have a choice. She signed a prenuptial agreement that gives her nothing if she divorces me, but guarantees her financial security if she stays married and follows our family's guidance. She's trapped, just like we planned. I felt sick. My daughter, for all her crimes and lies, was about to become a victim of people who were far more sophisticated and ruthless than she could ever be. Why are you telling me all of this? I asked again. Because I think you deserve to know what's really happening to your daughter, and because I think she deserves to know the truth about what she's gotten herself into. Are you planning to tell her? Number. But you might. I looked at this man, this stranger my daughter had married, and realized that he was offering me something I hadn't expected, a chance to save Sarah from something even worse than prison. What would you want in return? Nothing. I'm tired of being part of this family's schemes. I'm tired of the lies and the manipulation and the casual destruction of other people's lives. If this all comes crashing down, maybe that's what needs to happen. I picked up the folder containing the evidence of Sarah's crimes and held it for a moment, thinking about everything I'd learned in the past few minutes. My daughter was a thief and a liar, but she was also an unwitting pawn in a game played by people who made her look like an amateur. Mr. Ashford, I'm going to ask you one more time. What do you want from me? I want you to do whatever you think is right. For Sarah, for yourself, for everyone involved. I want you to make the choice that your daughter should have made when she had the chance. I stood up, tucking the folder under my arm. I'll be in touch. Mrs. Stone, whatever you decide to do, I want you to know that I'm sorry. For my family's part in this. For the way we've treated you, for the way we've treated Sarah. You both deserved better. As I walked out of that coffee shop, my mind was racing with possibilities. I could go to Sarah with this new information, could warn her about what her new family was really planning for her. I could go to the FBI with everything I knew about both Sarah's crimes and the Ashford family's manipulation. I could simply walk away and let them all destroy each other. But as I stood on the sidewalk outside the coffee shop, watching Boston's wealthy elite walk past in their expensive clothes and their carefully maintained bubbles of privilege, I realized there was really only one choice that made sense. I was going to tell Sarah everything. About the investigation closing in on her, about her new family's real plans for her future, about the choice she needed to make between facing her crimes honestly or becoming a permanent pawn in someone else's game. And then I was going to let her decide for herself what kind of person she wanted to be. It was the last gift I could give my daughter. The gift of choice, made with full knowledge of the consequences. The call I made to Sarah from my hotel room that afternoon was the hardest conversation I'd ever had with another human being. Mom? She sounded surprised and hopeful, like maybe I was calling to forgive everything that had happened. Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. The FBI is coming for you tomorrow. You're going to be arrested for embezzlement and identity theft." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "How do you know that?" "Because I hired a private investigator, and because I just had a very interesting conversation with your husband." "You talked to Marcus? Mom? What did you tell him?" "I told him everything. About the stolen money, about the identity theft, about all of it. But Sarah, that's not why I'm calling." I told her about my conversation with Marcus, about the Ashford family's real reasons for approving their marriage, about their plans to use her as a public relations shield for their own crimes. "That's not true," she whispered when I finished. "Marcus loves me." "Maybe he does. But his family doesn't. They see you as a useful tool, nothing more." "I don't believe you." "Then ask him. Ask him about his family's federal investigation. Ask him about their plans for your future. Ask him why they were willing to let you maintain the lie about me being dead." She was crying now, deep sobs that reminded me of the little girl she used to be. "Mom, what am I supposed to do?" "You're supposed to make a choice. You can face the consequences of your actions honestly, serve whatever time you have to serve, and start over with your life intact. Or you can let the Ashfords turn you into their puppet and spend the rest of your life being used by people who see you as disposable." "But if I go to prison?" "If you go to prison, you'll serve your time and get out as a free woman. If you stay married to Marcus, you'll spend the rest of your life as a prisoner in a different kind of cell. What about you? What about us?" I thought about that question for a long time before answering. "Sarah, I'll always be your mother. I'll always love you, no matter what you've done or what you choose to do. But I can't save you from this. You have to save yourself. I'm scared. I know you are. But being scared doesn't excuse what you've done, and it doesn't mean you get to keep running from the truth. Will you? Will you visit me? If I go to prison?" The question broke my heart and gave me hope at the same time. For the first time in days, my daughter sounded like someone who was thinking about facing her problems instead of running from them. "Sarah, if you choose to face this honestly, if you choose to take responsibility for what you've done and try to make it right, then I'll be there for you every step of the way. I'll visit you. I'll write to you. I'll help you rebuild your life when you get out. And if I don't? If you choose to stay with Marcus and let his family use you, then I think we both know this is the last real conversation we'll ever have." She was quiet for a long time, and I could hear her thinking, weighing her options, trying to decide what kind of person she wanted to be. "Mom? Yes? I'm sorry. For everything. For lying about you. For trying to steal from you. For shutting you out of my life. I'm sorry for becoming someone you couldn't recognize. I know you are. Do you think there's any way back from this? Any way I can become the person you raised me to be?" I looked out my hotel window at the city where my daughter had lost herself, where she'd traded her integrity for a life that was built on quicksand. "I think there's always a way back, Sarah, but it starts with telling the truth, even when the truth is going to hurt." The next morning I woke up to 2 phone calls. The first was from Rosa, telling me that federal agents had arrested Sarah at her apartment. The second was from Sarah herself, calling from the federal holding facility where she was waiting to be processed. "Mom?" I told them everything, about the embezzlement, about the identity theft, about all of it. I told them I want to cooperate fully. "And Marcus?" I told him I wanted a divorce. I told him I knew about his family's investigation and their plans for me. I told him I'd rather go to prison as myself than stay married as someone else's puppet. For the first time in days, I smiled. How did he take it? Better than I expected. I think he was relieved, actually. I think he was as tired of the lies as I was. "Sarah, what happens now?" "Now I face the consequences of my choices. I'll probably go to prison for a few years. I'll lose my law license, my career, everything I thought I wanted. But Mom?" "Yes?" "For the first time in years, I feel like myself again, like the person you raised me to be. That's all I ever wanted for you." "I know. And Mom, when I get out, when I've paid for what I did, would you maybe want to try again? You and me?" I thought about the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who used to tell me I was the best mommy in the world. I thought about the woman who'd stood on those mansion steps and called me nobody important. I thought about the daughter who'd just chosen honesty over convenience, prison over a gilded cage. Sarah, I've been waiting 30 years for you to come home. I'll wait as long as it takes. As I hung up the phone and began packing for my flight back to Iowa, I realized that my trip to Boston had accomplished something I'd never expected. I hadn't just exposed the truth about my daughter's crimes. I'd given her the chance to choose who she wanted to be. And for the first time in years, she'd chosen to be the woman I'd raised her to be. Someone who faced her mistakes honestly, who took responsibility for her actions, who chose the hard right over the easy wrong. It would be a long road back. Sarah would serve her time, would lose everything she'd thought she wanted, would have to rebuild her life from nothing. But she'd do it as herself, not as someone else's carefully constructed fiction. And I'd be there to help her, the way I'd always been there, the way mothers are supposed to be there for their children. The plane ride home was peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years. I was going back to my 3 jobs, and my small apartment, and my simple life in Cedar Falls. But I was also going back with something I'd lost somewhere along the way. I was going back with my daughter. Not the lying, stealing stranger who'd called the police on me, but the real Sarah, the one who'd chosen truth over comfort, consequences over escape. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined when I'd spent my life savings to fly to Boston for her wedding. But it was better than anything I'd dared to hope for when I'd walked away from that mansion 3 days ago. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone you love is refuse to enable their lies. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give is the truth, even when the truth is devastating. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the people you love will choose to be worthy of that gift. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.